All right, people. Up until very recently, most extremists on whether that's Prevent's watch list or the FBI's watch list, or even right here in Australia, ASIO's terror watch list, I would say roughly around 90% and above belong to only one ideology. They were all Islamists. Across the board, without fail, we noticed something, especially in the UK, because UK got conquered by the Islamists before any other country. So I think the vast majority of home office workers in the UK are Muslims. Some of them even have ties to extremist Muslim organizations. There was a video of a woman who worked for the home office, and she was in a training video, and then she recognized one of her cousins as one of the extremists flagged by MI5 or something similar as an Islamist extremist. So to counteract that, Muslims changed the definition of extremism. They said, well, if you are going to classify extreme Islamist views as extremists, then you need to broaden the definition of extremism. So they started including cultural nationalism or just nationalism as a form of extremism. And similar things are happening in Australia. I've said this before, whatever happened in the UK is going to eventually happen in Australia, because Australia is running 5 to 10 years behind. We are importing a lot of Muslims, and now we're appeasing them. We're bending over backwards for them. We are eroding our own Western values just to accommodate their values, their way of life. So have a look at this. Our Home Affairs Minister, Tony Burke, just announced something. So let's have a listen what he has to say.
But let me start with the announcement, which had always been planned for today, because in terms of national security and keeping people safe, it is an extraordinarily significant announcement.
Up until very recently, maybe even now, most people featured on ASIO's terror watch list, I think I would say 90 to 95%, are all Islamist extremists, or in other words, they're Muslims. Okay? But now they're trying to broaden the definition again and include you and me in that too, as people who are culturally traditionalist or nationalists. Just loving the Australian way of life is a form of extremism. Putting Australia first is a form of extremism. Have a listen.
Today we're announcing that the Albanese government will provide $74 million over 2 years for the Counter-Terrorism Online Centre. In addition to what had always been there, we had a new emerging threat online. Effectively, we had 4 characteristics which were not traditionally part of how we would regard counter-terrorism operations in Australia. And effectively, those 4 features were increasingly, we had people being radicalised online, being radicalised fast, having mixed ideology and not necessarily the traditional ideologies that might be attached to terrorism, and finally, people being young. Those 4 characteristics effectively meant that radicalisation, which we might have always associated with the meeting room, was now also happening in the chat room.
Ooh.
In a security environment where radicalisation increasingly occurs online and extremists increasingly engage with each other in encrypted chat groups, ASIO.
Speaking of chat groups, I have created a Telegram group for Western Patriots. Currently, we have 200 members and growing. I suggest you join our group. We're all Western Patriots, whether you're from America, Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand. We share our ideas. We get to know each other, and we radicalize each other. No, actually, we de-radicalize ourselves. A lot of people were radicalized with this idea that all people are equal. Once you open the borders, everyone just sits together and sing Kumbaya. They forget about their previous identities. Actually, no, that's not even a requirement anymore, according to Tony Burke, the guy you saw before. He says there's no need to integrate. There's no need to assimilate. You don't have to lose your previous identity. If you hate the Jews, that's perfectly fine. Be who you are. Stay loyal and true to who you are.
The concept of immigration is
People, when they come to Australia, want to be part of Australia. That's what people want. And I've never accepted the word assimilation. I don't want people to lose who they are. The word integration is one that's being used as part of a multicultural dialogue for a very long time. And that's what it is. Like, we want people for who they are. I've never subscribed to that sort of melting pot concept that your whole identity is meant to be dissolved.
It must be online too. I continue to be extremely concerned by the number of young people, particularly young men, who are being radicalised online and mobilising to violence relatively quickly with little to no warning.
They haven't mentioned Islamism once. There's a surprise coming at the end, I think.
I therefore welcome the government's decision to invest directly in these capabilities. Gaining access to extremists and their chat groups requires training, resources, time, specialist knowledge and specialist technology. This investment will uplift the number of people we, ASIO and the Australian Federal Police, have engaging in online operations and invest in the tools they need to help identify and disrupt targets before they move to real-world violence. The challenge posed by online radicalisation and encryption is significant and continues to grow. And this investment will improve our ability to identify and monitor Sunni violent extremists, nationalists and racist violent extremists.
Nationalist and racist violent extremists. You and I could be in that category now. With one broad brush, they've painted all of us. Saying that I want to preserve the Australian way of life, I put Western values above everything else. As an Australian citizen, I put the Australian Constitution above everything else. Nothing else comes before the Australian Constitution. No other way of life is more sacred to me than the Australian way of life. That is a form of extremism now. How many terrorist acts have been committed by nationalists, extremists? None. None. Literally none.
Anarchist and revolutionary violent extremists and any other entities that advocate politically motivated violence, and this will make a significant contribution to our collective capabilities to protect Australia and Australians.
He said anarchists and revolutionary activists. So I'd like to know if she has had a knock on the door. She said, burn down all the police stations. Hey, look, since they passed those hate speech laws in December last year, I've been expecting a knock on my door, but for some reason I haven't had it yet. Maybe we're being too paranoid. Maybe these laws are helpless. Anyway, I'm expecting a knock on the door. I'm always ready for it. I'm mentally prepared.
Capabilities to protect Australia and Australians.
Shielding kids from manipulation and harm is one of my key priorities as Commissioner. The Counter-Terrorism Online Centre will allow ASIO and the AFP to identify, target and disrupt credible threats which will be triaged and coordinated for action. The new capability will also provide an early warning system for the nation's joint counter-terrorism teams about emerging hate groups and individuals who use social media, gaming platforms, online forums, and our dark web to incite and commit violence.
Okay, no one should commit violence, and I don't care which ideological background you belong to, even if they are traditionalists, culturalists, nationalists, who are inciting violence. Sure, go for them, I don't care. But I have a problem with this labeling, okay? And I quote, they called it racist and nationalist extremists. Putting nationalists right next to racist, that is very offensive, first of all, and that's inappropriate. So I would like to propose something. They need to add anti-nationalism as a form of extremism too. So I've defined it. Let me read it. Just like they have nationalist extremism, they need to call the other side anti-nationalism extremism. So anti-national extremism is an ideological worldview that rejects, undermines, or seeks to dissolve a nation's historic identity, cultural traditions, social cohesion, shared values, and national interests. It often frames national identity, patriotism, borders, or cultural continuity as inherently illegitimate or oppressive, while promoting the erosion of the institutions, customs, and narratives that historically unified the nation and made Australia great. In the Australian context, anti-national extremism may include hostility towards Australian cultural norms, contempt for national heritage and symbols like the Australian flag, rejection of integration into mainstream society, or advocacy for policies that weaken social cohesion and collective identity. That is a form of extremism, and I call it anti-nationalist extremism. None of these problems existed until Islam came along. As I said, up until very recently, over 90% of people on terror watch list all belong to Islam. Whichever category of Muslim you want to put them, that's up to you. Whether that was the FBI's terror watch list, the UK's Prevent watch list, or Asia's terror watch list, all Islamists. And now just to make these Islamists feel better, they are broadening the definition. So, well, you got to fight fire with fire.